I'm just going to record this and hopefully I can edit it into a coherent narrative. Hi, it's Cynthia from Cheerful Nihilism or Cheerful Nihilism. Both of those pronunciations are correct. It's true. Technically correct. I've been in therapy with the same therapist for, gosh, almost 8 years now. Whoa! You know who you are. We actually talk, she watches my vlogs and we talk about it afterwards, so it's very cool. Hello, my friends. When you're in a relationship with one or, people or a few people even, you have a contract with them, that person. And if they cheat on you, it's your choice whether or not to stay in that relationship, I guess. But to me, if you've made an agreement with somebody to be faithful to them, then if they're cheating on you, that means that the agreement has been violated, and it's violated because there's something fundamentally wrong in the relationship, right? Somebody's not getting the attention they want or need. It's not a malicious thing. It's just a fundamental mismatch in orientations and needs and the ability or capacity to show affection and be present and connect and communicate. Because it's like a constant effort, if you want to be in a relationship with somebody, it's constantly work. You got to renegotiate those hard and soft limits and the borderlands between what you will and will not do and what you are willing to and will not do for other people is constantly shifting and changing. There's no concrete static identity of you and then this concrete static defined identity of this other person that just operate mechanistically with each other in a routine and methodical way that you can expect to continue on in perpetuity. You constantly shift and move and make room for them and they make room for you. It's a dance. I'm just struggling to find a good analogy for it, but it's not you don't reach a certain level in your relationship and then you're just there. Ultimately, I don't think there's ever a 100% pure bad guy in a situation. It's just a fundamental mismatch in personalities and values. But it's how you do what you do in reaction to that fundamental mismatch that can make you into a bad guy. Right? If you feel like control is slipping away from you, and instead of trying to talk about it and understand it, you just clamp down and try to control the other person even more, that makes you a bad guy. You become a bad guy in that action, because it's not circumstances that make you a villain or a hero. It's your choices and your responses and your reactions to those circumstances. So what am I talking about when I say reactions and responses, and I differentiate it so intently? It most directly related philosophically to the Stoics. Discipline of assent is what it's called. And I'll put a link in the description to talk about the discipline of assent. Another, in layman's terms, you might call it layman's terms, in a common vernacular, in a way that we could understand it. That's not jargon, shall we say? It's the power that comes in the pause between when you feel something and when you act on that feeling. There's a moment between recognition of a feeling and action. And even before the recognition of the feeling, there is a physical sensation in your body. So if you can backtrack before you get to the point of acting on something, there's an immense amount of power in being able to follow that to the physical source of the sensation, because then you take away the script, the story that your brain will inevitably create about any kind of situation or sensation you experience. The human brain functions more as a sensory filter than an organ of perception, to be honest with you. You have perceptions that are happening from your sense organs in your peripheral nervous system, like touching things and seeing things. And all that goes to your brain to get processed and put into a coherent narrative, a story, because humans are storytellers. So when you look at any kind of act of creativity or art, it's telling a story. It's the fundamental impulse of a human being, telling a story. And if you have nobody else to tell a story to, you will tell it to yourself. Okay? And that's great. It's great to know that, because then that kind of takes a lot of the intensity out of your thoughts and your feelings, because you know that you're telling yourself a story. You're telling yourself a story. You're taking these random bits of sensory information and putting it together, right? So you have a sensation in your body. Immediately, you will try to figure out why you have that sensation, where it's coming from, what caused it. And all this stuff happens at lightning fast, pre-conscious speeds, barely perceptible, sometimes not even perceptible. So how do you get out of that feedback loop of thought and reaction? Is usually, and this is what I do in therapy, but you could probably do this with anybody or even in a journal. You can sit and think about something that's bothering you. Usually it's something that has an emotional response where the volume is turned up way higher than the stimulus. Like some little thing happened at work or with a friend or something or online, and it just causes an intense response from you. That means that there's a story happening there. Okay? So you have an intense response to something, and this happens because you examine your life methodically over time, either by going to therapy or journaling or, whatever. Some people use freaking Excel spreadsheet, whatever works, but you have to just or mindfulness meditation even, intentionally examine the patterns with which you interact with others and yourself. And once you can do that, you can sort of sit with that discomfort and figure out where it is in your body. And then when you figure out where it is in your body, you go to where that sensation is and you just sit there and make space for it. Let it be. It's this insistent need for expression of something. And instead of allowing yourself to tell a story about it and then responding to the story, you just let that sensation express itself. And a lot of times what happens during this process is that all the emotional intensity that would have come with that reaction gets diffused. And then you have a moment without the emotional intensity because it's diffused, because you made space for it and allowed it to exist. And then you can think about things in a more calm, clear, and rational manner, and then respond to what happened. So the difference between reaction and response is that reaction happens without a lot of conscious thought and often leads to some negative consequences. Response happens because you have diffused the emotional intensity from whatever caused you to want to react, and then you considered it without that emotion-based intensity and proceeded logically without feeling like you're forced to do it or like you have a compulsion that you have to act on. One of my rules of thumb is that if I feel compelled to act on something really intensely, like I have to do it, I have to do it, I have to do it, that means I need to sit down and make space for that feeling. And I am not always very successful at it, but I try my best. I'm a work in progress, just like everybody else. But I'm glad I sat down and talked about this today because, I was talking about this in therapy last week to my therapist that, therapy is not accessible to everyone for a variety of reasons. You don't have access. You don't have health insurance. You live in an area where it's just not available. You live in an area where there are therapists that are not informed on things that have a lot more sensitive and nuanced, like domestic violence. Or you live in an area where the therapy community is not necessarily trained on things that are more sensitive and nuanced, like domestic violence and rape and sexual assault and molestation and child abuse. And that's like, it's not cut and dried stuff. It's not like the regular stuff you learn in school. It's stuff you kind of have to do continuing education for and get specialized training in. So, if you have those circumstances where therapy is not available to you, then by all means, use me as a tool. Please use me as a resource. Like, I have over 20 years in and out of therapy and almost 8 years with my current therapist and a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in psychology. So please use me. Use me. Okay. Well, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for following me. If this is your first time listening to me, please check out my other social media. It's the tits. Until next time. Mwah. Bye.